So I am going to talk about the North American Bhangra circuit. I have been trying my best to negotiate the boundaries between academic discourse and something that will be interesting to the community. And so thus far my paper is entitled Consuming Memory, Producing Nostalgia, Reflections on Bhangra Scholarship and the North American Bhangra Circuit. So integral to the discipline of anthropology, which is where I come from and have my training in, is participant observation. This was the first picture I was able to find of me and somebody who was supposed to be here. But I danced in the Bhangra circuit since 2006, and some people who've trained me to dance and other people I've shared the stage with are here in this room. There are actually some titans of the Bhangra community, if you didn't know, and I can identify them later if you'd like me to. So here's a short outline of what we're going to be talking about today. I'd like to give you guys a historical sketch of Bhangra, what Bhangra is as an object of study for the academy, and the epistemology, or the way of knowing that cultural studies as a particular academic discipline has had, how they come to understand Bhangra. We'll talk a little bit about Bhangra's history in North America. We'll talk about how Bhangra has slowly become to be made a Sikh space, which really negates the cultural studies understanding of it. We'll talk a little about the Bhangra in the mainstream, and finally we'll end with women in Bhangra, so I can better interface with the other panelists. So, whether at Bhangra. So this is a map of the undivided Punjab that was produced in the colonial era. A lot of people like to think of Bhangra as something that's happened from time immemorial. I've heard other dancers in the community say that this is a tradition that we're taking on for 500 years, et cetera, et cetera. The way in which I interpret the history of Bhangra is really indebted to a man by the name of Gib Scheffler, who's an ethnomusicologist out of the University of California, Santa Barbara. He has spent more time in the Punjab than any person I know of non-Punjabi descent in terms of academic work, and lived with Bazigar dole players and spoke to people on both sides of the Punjab to get a better understanding of folk forms in the Punjab. Bhangra is not his expertise, but he's produced the most rigorous academic work on it. And his basic understanding of it, which I tend to agree with, and the scholarly community as a whole agrees with now, is that there were regional folk dances that existed in the Punjab on both sides. Partition happens, and those regional dances sort of come together in the melting pot of the Indian side of Punjab in refugee camps. It became clear that by bringing these sort of dances together, you could sort of come together a more concrete form that wasn't just like one or two moves. So if you know, there's a place called Sialkot in Pakistani Punjab. We have a move in Bhangra that we call Sialkoti, and it's pretty clear where that came from. So these sort of more regional and localized forms came together post-partition in India, and through the institution of the India All Republic Day Parade, these dances amalgamated together to be called Bhangra, and were presented on the national level as the regional cultural dance of Punjab. After that, everybody ended up liking it a lot. And once that Republic Day ended, this cultural folk form began to be institutionalized through interzonal youth competitions and in schools. So that's why, so if you go to Punjab today and you go to GNDU and you ask them to show me Bhangra, they'll show you Bhangra like a lot of you guys imagine it. But if you just go, you cross Wagah border and you go to Lahore and you go to LUMS or one of the other universities and ask them to do Bhangra for you, you won't recognize what they're doing. And that comes out of this post-partition history that I just outlined for you. This is the Republic Day function in 1970. I just want you to take a hard look at the individuals in it. You see that there are four dancers and there's a dole player. Keep the image of that dole player in your head for the next one. But these Republic Day functions that happened in Delhi, where Punjab's representational dance was Bhangra, became really important in its institutionalization in general. So this is where I'm going to kind of put my academic hat on for a little bit, so I'm sorry if I lose some of you. But within the academy, the idea of studying Bhangra there hasn't been very much attention paid to Bhangra, and when it has been, it's been in what's called the cultural studies framework. Cultural studies is a discipline that I myself am not very familiar with. It happens in the UK. The big idea is that you read popular culture, and you read popular culture as text. So you look at magazines, you look at newspapers, you look at music videos to try and interpret what's going on and make social science out of those arguments. So Gayatri Gopinath, who got her PhD in literature actually, has written the most well-cited paper on Bhangra. And citations matter in the academy because the more citations you have, the more people interpret and are dialoguing with your argument. So Gopinath actually puts a paper together in 1995 called Bombay, UK, Yuba City. And in this paper, she's talking about the South Asian diaspora, and she's talking about the potentialities and the limits of diaspora as a theoretical framework to make arguments out of. And Gopinath and cultural studies in general like to think that that the world can become a better place through mixing things, through hybridity, through fusioning of identities, in which multicultural communities can come together, can dialogue with each other, and hope for a better future. Very much like the community coalition building that we were talking about yesterday. Scholars like her really want to push that as forward as far as they can. So she wants to push this solidarity along, and her theoretical framework is Stuart Hall, who is also another cultural theorist, who likes to build bridges between brown-skinned communities. Particularly, the way Gopinath reads it is that you have the Indian brown community in the UK, and you have the Black, Caribbean, and African communities in the UK, and they share a common experience of racism that's institutionalized in the UK, and because of this institutionalized racism, these are two communities that automatically should be put in conversation with each other. So what Gopinath does in her paper, and that everybody following her sort of follows in that footstep, is that when Punjabi musicians put a reggae beat in the back, that shows some sort of political solidarity in the back, solidarity together. Because the South Asian community in the UK becomes Black through certain forms of institutionalized racism, these musical forms and these hybrid identities of bumping along to reggae beats shows a kind of solidarity between the two kinds of groups. And for scholars like Gopinath, that's a political aspiration to have, and that's a way to move communities forward. The next, and this is actually very important, and I'm going to quote at length here. Stuart Hall, who Gopinath cites extensively, says, "Popular culture, commodified and stereotyped as it often is an arena that is profoundly mythic. It is where we discover and play with the identification of ourselves, where we are imagined and where we are represented, not only to audiences out there who do not get the message, but to ourselves for the first time." So if you guys can follow along with my argument here, Gopinath and scholars like her really privilege popular culture by reading it only as text and not necessarily engaging with it. As an anthropologist, our method is participant observation and ethnography, where we try and live with the informants and live with the arguments that we're trying to make. So my issue and my argument that I have in this sort of scholarly community about Bhangra is that thinking in this way is dangerous, particularly if you're trying to use it in an activist sense. To provide an example, the current #1 hip-hop song right now, which is a product of popular culture, is The Motto by Drake. And he has a lyric in it that says, "I'm in the building and I'm feeling myself. Rest in peace, Mac Dre. I'ma do this for the Bay." And I particularly resonate that for a particular kind of local politics that I have with an obsession with the Bay Area, but not because I share a particular kind of politics of money laundering and being in prison. And I would submit that taking for granted popular culture, but eliding serious engagement with those who consume and perform it, reinvents a kind of epistemic violence that has haunted the social sciences from its birth onwards. So for the sake of time, I'll just sort of skip through, but Galra, his intervention in this is that it's important to read the text of Bhangra songs, and he starts to do analyses about gender and caste, but again, he doesn't visit the communities that he's talking about, and so he sort of falls into the same sort of problems. Sunyana Myra wrote a book in 2011 called Desis in the House, or Desis Represent. That book is about the club culture in New York City, mostly basement Bhangra, where she again revisits a kind of politics in which South Asians of all different kinds of ethnicities, not just Punjabi, but Pakistani, Bangladeshi, South Indian, can come together in the form of a space of Bhangra, find their roots, and then perform their roots in these sorts of club spaces. Lee is actually an ethnomusicologist who studied the North American Bhangra circuit, and her work I actually find to be the most instructive because she talks about these scholars, but she also talks with competition organizers and with performers. And then lastly, Anjali Gada Roy just published a book in 2011 called Transnational Bhangra. She's a scholar from India, and I know we talked a little bit about the ways in which, especially the Western Academy, has problems with Indian scholarship. She sort of, again, begins to imagine the beauty of the transnational South Asian diaspora in that anybody can just plug into Bhangra and feel as if they're part of something. So that's kind of where Bhangra and the Academy is, and you guys will sort of begin to see why I take issue with these scholars in very profound ways by the rest of my presentation. And I'm very good friends with a couple of these people too, so it's nothing, there's no animosity in that sense. So Bhangra in North America, can anybody recognize the man in this picture? That's Gavi. That's Gavi, Gavneet Singh in 2002 on the stage of Tol Di Awaz. I'm assuming presenting flowers not to his girlfriend but to the winning team. So it's Tol Di Awaz is the intercollegiate Bhangra competition that started at UC Berkeley. Go Bears. And it's been there for a long time. In a story that kind of gets reproduced around North America, especially the United States, it was started by the SSA as a fundraiser to gain money for the SSA. Internal politics happen, and then it separates, and it's now on its own. But it's one of the most long-standing competitions in the United States. Bhangra in the United States as an intercollegiate cultural form has been going on since the early 1990s. Of course, it was performed in people's houses at any kind of celebration you could possibly want to do Bhangra at. But as an institutionalized form in an intercollegiate circuit, it was really the early 1990s. You had the first competition called Bhangra Blowout, which is now in its 19th year, is an intercollegiate competition. So 19 years we've had intercollegiate Bhangra competitions in the United States. In California, the oldest, some people like to fight about this, but Fresno State Punjab Night, people will argue, has been a competition for a long time. But San Jose State's competition, Nashta Punjab, was the first one, which Gurjeet has very strong alliances to. All right, we done? So this is, being in Northern California, if you're not familiar with the community, has been the center of innovation for Bhangra as a dance form for the longest time. We've had some of the oldest and most established teams coming out of here. We've been the innovators of more modern Bhangra that takes more liberties with folk moves, and we've had some of the most successful live teams. We're actually home to the very first all-girls team that doesn't dance on music. They dance with a dole and a singer. And that's really challenging a lot of cool things that we'll get into in a little bit. So, which comps are we applying to this year? So, beginning in as competitions in general were very much a collegiate thing for up until like the early 2000s. It was pretty much you go to UC Riverside, you're on the UC Riverside Bhangra team, and you go around California and you dance your little dance. What has happened with the explosion of Bhangra as a popular form is that you get private teams. So the teams that I danced for, a couple of the teams that I danced for, were just made up of people who lived in the greater San Jose Bay Area and wanted to come together to dance. And so that shifts the demographic, because the people who say, I want to learn Bhangra and I want to do Bhangra and then figure out their whole identity issues with it are often coming from Punjabi Sikh families, whereas the people who are in a university setting say, hi, I'm South Asian, I want to do my sort of reverse assimilation now and figure out my roots. Oh, look, there's a Bhangra team. Maybe that's a really cool and interesting way in which I can interface with other people who share my own identity. That kind of stuff, you're much more likely to be of non-Punjabi descent and find your home in those sorts of spaces than if you are just at home or at your university and finding another group of people who have similar interests to you in that particular sense. Sorry, I'm trying to negotiate two computers here. We need to consider, so after the 2000s, when there's a huge influx of Punjabi people coming into Bhangra and it becomes less of a pan-South Asian thing and a more of a Punjabi-centric thing and ostensibly a more Sikh-centric thing, there becomes this anxiety around traditionality. So if you look at Bhangra in the early 1990s, it just looks like the uncles we see very, very late at parties, where it's very uncoordinated, the moves are just kind of all over the place. And so with the influx of people, the influx of Punjabi people, the influx of people of uncles who studied and were part of Bhangra teams out of particular institutions like GNDU, like Punjab Agricultural University, those are sort of institutions that really helped to solidify Bhangra when it was that nebulous thing right after partition. So those men come to California, they come to the East Coast, and they say, no, Bache, this isn't Bhangra, this is what Bhangra is. So then the Bhangra community in the early 2000s goes through this sort of identity crisis in which it's trying to negotiate this sort of hybrid fusion identity, I can do whatever I want on stage as long as there's a role playing, and then this, no, there's a particular history, there are particular moves, and we need to reimagine ourselves and cookie cutter ourselves to look like everybody in Punjab, because that's the proper way of doing Bhangra. So this sort of contestation happens in the community and is still ongoing, but it only happens when you get this much larger influx of Punjabi people, and particularly Sikh people, who have this particular connection to the Punjab that they're much more interested and more invested in, rather than some sort of pan-South Asian identity. And so I think it's important for scholars and the community also really to consider what motivates individuals to participate in the Bhangra circuit versus just going to a Bhangra club party in which they can experience a commodified form of a particular dance and just sort of be in it for a few hours, rather than saying like, yeah, I go to school and Bhangra is my big hobby. I think that there's a lot to be said there, and so focusing necessarily on people like who go to clubs really elides a lot of the important scholarship that can come out of thinking about identity in diasporic situations. So, imagining community, nation, and a homeland. So what I argue is that through Bhangra and this obsession with trying to make our folk form similar to what's going on in Punjab, we've erased a lot of our own history, and we've erased a lot of very, very rich Punjabi culture. Gibbs' dissertation and his main informant was a dole player who's probably one of the most famous dole players in Punjab, Gurdeep Das. Doesn't sound like a Sikh name, does it? It's definitely not a Jat name. And so most of the dole players in Punjab and the dole masters come from the Bazigar and Valmiki communities and the Sansi communities. They're not Jat. And so my own politics aside, it's important to think about the ways in which we reinvent a certain kind of Jat masculinity in Bhangra and in dole players that really, really bothers the actual people who further dole as an art form in Punjab. It's a heritage-based art, in that if I'm a dole player now, my dad was a dole player, my dadaji was a dole player, and so on and so forth. So what Gibbs shows in his dissertation is that what we do here in the diaspora is completely disconnected to what happens in the Punjab, especially when we're trying to think about who should or shouldn't be playing the dole, and the kinds of lineages and the kind of histories that we've tended to make up. Gibb calls it this badass Bhangra identity that we need to really get away from if we're trying to stay true to it. But whether we want to stay true to it or not is really up to us, because we again are in the diaspora. I want to talk a little bit about the ways in which Bhangra as a folk, so the Bhangra circuit in North America, I argue, is the most dominant force in shaping what everybody transnationally thinks Bhangra is. If you go into YouTube right now and type in Bhangra, the people sitting in this room who contributed to the Bhangra scene are the people that come up. It's not people in Punjab, it's not, you know, somebody doing Bhangra in a pind. It's this circuit of people who've been working for the last 20 years and who've been dancing for the last 20 years. Their videos through YouTube are the ones that are coming up, and transnationally, they're the ones that are circulating. And I think that that's very important to think about, and it's very important to realize that whatever imaginary the people in North America have had about what Bhangra should be is the one that is now taking over. And we need to also be cognizant of the fact that we, as being the place that everybody from Punjab wants to migrate to, the fantasies that we have about what Punjab should look like, the fantasies that we have about what we want Punjab to be, there are cultural products coming out of the Punjab that specifically cater to our commodified tastes about what Punjab should be. So when you go to those stores and buy those t-shirts with Punjabi logos on them and things, they're not made for people in Punjab to wear. They're made for us to go and buy. And you can decide whether that's right or wrong, but I think it's important to think about the fact that the things that we do here have very, very real impacts for people who are super marginalized back in the Punjab. And the theoretical framework in which that operates in the academy is there's a man by the name of Benedict Anderson who wrote a book called Imagine Communities a few decades ago. He's a political scientist. He talks about the ways in which print capitalism, just written word, creates nationalism in communities, and it's not sui generis. It doesn't just happen. So when you can circulate a book around or a pamphlet around and say, this is what nationalism is, this is what the Sikh community is, this is what we need, that's where nationalism becomes super, super strong. And a man by the name of Brian Axel, who's one of the few anthropologists to work on the Sikh community, who's actually very famous for his work on the Sikh community, also makes us realize that through the circulation of commodities and print capitalism, a lot of us like to think that Punjab is here, we are here, and what happens in the Punjab floats over to us and we interpret it and embody Punjabi rules, Punjabi culture, and Punjabi identity. In fact, Axel argues, and I agree, and I think that the Bhangra community is an example of this, is that there's a dialogical relationship between homeland and diaspora. There's a dialogue that goes back and forth. And I think it's, especially in an era in which somebody could be going to Punjab tomorrow and get there in 2 days and bring with them their experiences from the United States and literally drop them on the ground in Punjab. I think through what's called time-space compression, or the fact that it's so easy to move back and forth, that these processes are happening at a more exacerbated rate. And the mainstream. So I think one important thing to think about is that a lot of scholars and a lot of people in the community, and when I argue that Bhangra is becoming a more Sikh and Punjabi space, I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, I'm simply saying that that's happening. And a lot of people who don't come from Sikh backgrounds or Punjabi backgrounds feel really marginalized by the Bhangra community. They feel as if they're on the outside and they have to work really, really hard to break in, and I think that's really unfair if you just like a dance and want to participate in it, and you're not able to simply because of somebody's own issues with their identity. But I think it's really important to consider the fact that the producers of Bhangra Nation went directly to a Punjabi satellite station, that everything that their hosts speak in Punjabi, and that it's still rooted in a Punjabi idiom. And the first sort of huge broadcast of Bhangra information, or like a Bhangra media forum, is still very, very rooted in a Punjabi idiom. You still have to be Punjabi to really understand and completely connect with it, for better or for worse. So does anybody know who these two people are? Anyone should shout it out. DJ Rekha and? Thank you very much. So Serena Jain, this one, is a fitness guru, she likes to say. She started Masala Bhangra, and and that's actually, I'll be very honest with you, as an academic, it really, really bothers me that all of those scholars who I mentioned in the beginning, I was at a conference with about half of them, and they all say Bhangra. And that really, really bothered me, because if you're an academic, then you should at least study the language that you're speaking in, and even if you don't know Punjabi, you should know Hindi, and you should know that it's not that. So Serena Jain, about 10 years ago, started Masala Bhangra, and if you go online and look, if you search Masala Bhangra, it's really funny what she was doing in the beginning. It was just this woman who was trying to do her best to make a fitness video. Her sister's a physical, she's like an exercise master's degree something, and so they came together to try and figure out a way in which you could take the Bhangra that they knew and that they grew up with, which is very much that early 1990s moment. How could they make that into a commodity, sell it, and make it happen? And aside from the politics of selling it and whatnot, she is probably the main way that people who are not of South Asian descent interface with Bhangra today. People buy her DVDs. She trains people, and they pay her so that you can go to her, learn from her, and then go to your local gym in Kentucky and say, oh, I know Masala Bhangra, and I'll come and learn Bhangra from my class. So then you get into those politics that I think some of the other presenters have gone into, about consuming a particular kinds of identity, about Orientalism, about making things commodities and stuff. But it's important, I think, to consider that, number one, that this woman is not from a Punjabi heritage herself, hasn't learned the history of Bhangra at all, but is the mainstream face for it. And she is her. So then there's DJ Rekha, who is the founder of Basement Bhangra in New York City, which is a monthly nightclub night, and in the summers I think it runs twice, where they just play Bhangra music. For people who are in the Bhangra circuit, like myself, like if I took harp down there, we would be sad like half the time, because the music that they play isn't really the stuff that we would dance to. But again, it's one of those places in which people in the mainstream can come and interface with Bhangra, for better or for worse. And so I think this sort of disconnect, and both of these individuals have very, very rarely interfaced with the Bhangra circuit that's been around for about 20 years. So I think it's also really important to consider that the big face of Bhangra, at least, doesn't really take the time to step back and interface with the Bhangra community. Serena Jain just did 2 weeks ago by reaching out to an all-male Bhangra team in New York City, in which she like cries in the video and says, I just do everything for my dad, and what is Bhangra? Which is great that she's asking it, but from my own personal partial perspective, I wish you just asked that question 10 years earlier. But it is what it is. So now we get into women in Bhangra. Does anybody recognize the girl in the middle, in the red? That's Jasmine. So in addition to being a very, very critical and insightful scholar of law and race, Jasmine's one of the most famous Bhangra superstars that we've got in the community, and I respect her a lot for it. She single-handedly, so one thing that I need to make clear is the reason that I can talk about how people feel in the community outside of me just going to competitions is there are two websites that are integral to people talking about Bhangra. One of them is a very, very infamous Punjab Online, where people would make up accounts and be like, oh, Rimi sucks at dancing Bhangra, I hate her team. And that existed for a good like 6 years, in which it was just really like slanderous. And then after that, a new website came up that people go to now called Bhangra Teams Forum, in which there's much more accountability. You can't really bash people. And people, well, there are moderators now, and there's discussion in the community, and people can advance what they think. And people can have discussions about, you know, maybe it is good for this to happen in the Bhangra community. Maybe it isn't good for us to do this. Maybe we should have judges that do this and judges that do that. So for women in Bhangra, women emerged onto the US Bhangra scene from the get-go. There were co-ed teams going on, as always. But women have had to face a lot to get the same kind of respect as dancers, and for them to be able to do exactly what they wanted to do. We have community members in the Bay Area who are judges who will just automatically give a team half the points if there are women dancing on stage, because they believe that it is inappropriate for a girl to dance Bhangra for a variety of reasons. Some of them are just that women don't belong on stage. Some of them are that women should dance Gidda. Some of them are that they think it's just vulgar for a woman to be performing. And for that, and I don't address Gidda on this because I'm not a Gidda expert at all. But we do have Gidda competitions now that happen in the last couple of years, which I think is great. So women have had to overcome certain kinds of patriarchy, both from the top and also from the bottom, from their own peers. You see men saying that women can't dance Bhangra as well, that maybe we should have separate competitions or separate categories for them. So even within our own liberal politics, we see our peer men saying that, you know, maybe this isn't what we want. I'm short on time, so what I'm going to do is just simply say this. If you look at these two different kinds of women, my entry into feminism is through science and technology studies and techno-feminism. I'd rather be a goddess. I'd rather be a cyborg than a goddess kind of stuff. Donna Haraway, UCSC. So the best way I can come at it is this. Women in the Bhangra circuit up until now have tried their very best to say, if a man can dance like this, I can dance like this, or maybe even better than him. But unfortunately what that does is say that men are the epitome of what we want to try and be. So in that frame, I will do whatever it takes for me to be able to do that. And so there was a big victory for women in the Bhangra community when there was an all-male team who won a competition a few months ago, and there was a girl dancing in a men's outfit the entire time. And then right at the very end, she took off her pug, the crowd goes crazy, and then she finishes her dance. She had her tunic on and everything underneath. And I think that's really awesome to say that, look, women can dance as well as men. But what I think that elides is a possibility for women to think a more radical feminist politics that can emerge in a setting like this. Because if we as a community want to excel, I don't think any of us want to say we want to be white Christian, or that we want to be white Christian men, or that we want to be white. We want to be able to inhabit our own subject position in a way that lets us have a more radical politics to be happy, healthy, and make our own communities in the way we want to perceive them and do them. And I think that women, by doing this in the Bhangra circuit, unfortunately are falling into that same sort of kind of trapping. And the reason that I have this particular thing going on is there's a fight in the Bhangra community that, oh, women should be able to wear chadre like men, instead of just having to wear a salwar kameez. Like Jasmine does. And I mean, for my personal politics, I think Jasmine looks better than the girls on the other girls. And then like their legs are accentuated better and stuff. But these are the kinds of politics that are really animating the Bhangra circuit right now. So I thank you guys very much for your time and patience, and I look forward to the commentary.